Great. Hello, everyone. I think I know everyone, but my name's Eva. I thought I'd give you a little bit of background of my coaching experience. So I currently play for Nexus in Wellington, and I've helped coach them for 4 or 5 years. I also coach the New Zealand under-24 women's team, Karere. I've helped out coaching the New Zealand Women's Masters team, Kotare, and I've also helped out a bit with Hutt Valley High School girls team. And I'm not saying this to show off at all. I'm just kind of saying it because I've been exposed to a range of groups of people and made a lot of mistakes in all of those arenas. And hopefully that means I can relate to who you guys are coaching. So my plan is I'm going to talk through 3 things. So the first one is planning a season. And then I'm going to talk about planning selections, which might not be relevant to everyone, but I think there's some good lessons that can be learned from it. And then the last thing I'll talk about is planning an individual training session. And after each section, sort of for my sanity, and because we've got a small group, we'll stop and have questions so I don't feel like I'm talking to myself. And then we can have more questions at the end. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is planning a season. So what I think, another caveat before I start is that I'm going to say one way of doing things from my experiences, but there is so many ways of doing things in Frisbee. So sometimes it might sound like I'm telling you to do things this way, but you can do things whatever way you choose. This is just some things I've learned along the way. So, okay, planning a season. So I think the first thing that's important to do is work out what your key event is that you are working towards. And you don't actually need a key event. It could be that you are putting together a team for a league season and you're just going to play out the season. But you may have a key event such as a national championships or another tournament that you're working towards. So I think it's important to work out that so you have an idea of the timeline you're working with. And to combine with that, the next thing that I think is important is to work out what your goals are for the season. So that could be something broad, like reaching your potential. It could be winning your key event. It could be having fun, learning lots, development. Those are all great goals. And these can change as you move through the season. I just think it's important to have an idea of what you're going for in your vision at the beginning. So you've got your key event and your goals. Once you've got those two, I'd start to think about what kind of build-up events you could have in your season. So we have some really good warm-up tournaments in New Zealand that you could use as build-up events. If you don't have access to those, things like scrimmages in your region against local clubs. And these are really great as check-in points towards your goal, opportunities to reassess or direct future planning. So once you have those, the next thing I'd start to think about is what local activities you will need to get to your goal. So this could be selection events, which I'll talk about in a second. Trainings, what are those going to look like? How many are you going to have a week? For how long? You could think about things like training camps, team gym sessions. Are you going to enter your team into a local league? What social events are you going to have? So once you have an idea of all of these activities that are going to fill up your season, I think it's a good idea to kind of put them together in a skeleton plan. I'm going to share my screen. Give me a thumbs up if you can see that. Yes. Okay, cool. So this is a kind of skeleton plan that we put together at the start of this Nexus season. So we just had 1 weekly training. So we've got the dates of all of those down the side. And blue means we're going to have low attendance because there's something else going on. And green are our build-up events and our main event, which is nationals. It just gives you a nice visual of what the season's going to look like. And you can count out how many training sessions you're going to have and start to kind of fill in the gaps. So that's our skeleton plan. It's also kind of a good thing to look at and be is this going to fit our purpose? Is this too much time, not enough time? Should we add more things? So once you've got your skeleton plan, you can kind of start thinking about what you actually want to, like, what topics you want to cover in trainings to like get towards your goal. So these could be things like handler resets, offensive structures like vertical or horizontal, defensive structures like, do you want to go over match defense? Do you want to try some different zones, end zones? You could think of individual skills and drills that you might want to do to work on those. And it's also perfectly fine to like schedule time to like get to know your teammates, build that like team vibe, all perfectly good things. So once you kind of have like your skeleton plan and a list of things you want to do to like get to your goal, you can put those together in a more detailed plan. Okay, cool. So this is a more detailed season plan that we've had in the past. So it maps out each of our training sessions. We've got like date, day, time, type. They're all training, so I don't know. But you might have something else like a pod or a gym session. What the priorities are for the session. And then we've got space to put in like maybe what new skills we're putting in, what repeated skills we might have, and who's running it, any extra notes. And at this stage we had like a newbie coach, so we had someone specifically for if there were new people at training, and we wanted someone whose job it was to look after those people. So when you're doing your more detailed planning, don't feel like you have to go ahead and like fill out this whole calendar straight away. I'd fill it out in like little bits, maybe like up to your first tournament check-in event. It's totally fine to leave it unplanned after that. Maybe you have a general idea, but like take some learnings from that tournament or check-in event to like build it as you go along. So don't feel like you need to plan the whole session. Definitely leave space for like learnings and stuff like that. Okay, and so just like a general idea of how I would plan a season, which you do not have to follow, but the way I generally do it is like at the start, I'd have a couple of like welcome sessions, which are kind of a bit more chill, friendly and fun, but also like setting the tone about what we're about. So like me or like our club and the people coming in can kind of feel each other out. After that is when I would have selections, if I was having selections. And then I'd move into like new concepts and refreshing concepts from previous seasons that I thought we need to cover before our first check-in event. After that, it would be possible to maybe add a few more concepts, but would really mainly start to be like using learnings from the check-in event and building on what we've learned before. Then maybe you go to another tournament and then some more learnings and building and really working on like game time and playing together as a team before you go to your main event. So that's all I'm going to say on planning a season. Does anybody have any questions at this stage on that?
Like that you had throws and drinking as a scheduled activity in your season.
That's very important.
Social.
Cool. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. All right. So, the next thing I'm going to talk about is selections. I know not everyone will run selections, but I think there's some really good learnings that can come from this stuff anyway. So I'm going to go through it. So the most important thing for selections, I think, is communicating really clearly, honestly, and early. So as leaders in your various teams, you have so much freedom as to how you run selections and what your selection criteria are. You can do whatever you want. It's your team. I think what's really important is that what those are communicated really clearly to your audience. People are going to be less mad, probably still a bit sad, but less mad if they knew exactly what was going on, exactly what they were being like compared against, and like the exact process of how it would be run. So it's really good to be really clear with your communication. So your selection process could be like paper-based. You could just take like EOIs and pick from there. You could have one training session as a selection event. You'd have multiple training trainings as a selection event. Like, all of those are perfectly fine options. It just needs to be communicated to your group. And the same goes with selection criteria. Like, you can pick the best players, or you can pick the most committed players, or the most fun players. Like, all totally fine options as long as it was communicated clearly. So I'm going to share my screen. Ooh. So this was our selection criteria for Nexus for this year. And I really like this because I think it's really clear and obvious what we're looking for under like a number of categories. And that's really great for the players because they know what we're looking for. But it's also really helpful for the selectors and the leadership because any qualms that come up, we've got something really, really clear to point to. So we had some guidelines for skills, game awareness. We also have things like regular attendance at training and pods, evidence of effort to improve outside of sessions, and team player things like support from the sideline during games and drills, and regulating emotions. Cool. So I think it's important to communicate everything about your selection event that you can really clearly, like who the selectors are, where the selections will be, what the selection criteria are, when you will announce a team. I don't think there's much to be gained by being mysterious about any of these things. If you can communicate them without like causing a conflict of interest, I think it's a really good idea. The same thing goes with feedback. I know this can be really hard and a bit awkward, but even if it is, and someone asks about like their realistic chances of making a team, it's really, really good to be like honest with them, give them clear feedback and guidance on what they need to work on, what you're looking for. And like, I know it's hard and it's easier to fluff the details, but I think everyone's going to be happier at the end of the day if we're clear and honest. In terms of like the actual running, if you run a selection event, I would make sure that you set up drills and game situations that test specifically your selection criteria. So when you set up a drill, make sure you know what you are testing with this drill. I think it's important to be aware that there is a difference between someone being good at a drill and someone being good at a skill in a game, especially if it's a drill that you run all the time at your trainings. So this is my personal preference, therefore, would be to run a lot of things through game situations. I really like this. Some examples are, say you're looking for someone who can move the disc quickly. You can do things like reducing the stall count in a game and seeing how comfortable they are. If you are looking for people who are heads up on defense, you could make a rule that you can't mark the same person for 2 stall counts in a row. Or you can do things like reducing the number of players on the field to assess people's option taking, have a look at their fitness, see how they react on defense, their like defensive grind. Something that I think is really important for selections is, it sounds really obvious, but like actually looking at the players during selections. I'm sure everyone's heard people complaining that about this not happening. So if you are a selector, make sure you have enough people around you to help like set up drills so you are actually able to watch the players. Players are bound to have questions during selections, and make sure to make time for those, but don't let it be at the expense of you watching people. So maybe set aside some time after the training to answer some questions. It's also important to be aware that selections cannot be done perfectly. Multiple iterations of a team or teams could have worked or performed well. So I think it's important that everyone backs themselves and is confident and stands behind their decisions. You're all doing the best job you can with the time and the information available. I'm just going to say one more thing about selections, which is something I kind of learned about recently. So I think that it's really important to have diversity in a team. And I believe that diversity in terms of cultures, backgrounds, and life experiences really adds to a team and makes it stronger. And I'm pretty sure that's scientifically proven. I didn't read any articles. But as a selector, it's really easy to gravitate towards players who play and behave like you do. So it's important to be aware of your like norms and your privileges and potential blind spots that you might have as a selector. So to talk through this, I'm going to give some examples. Okay, example 1. So personally, this is true. I'm sure everyone knows this is true. I really hate it when people are late to training. As a selector, that would really grind my gears if someone was late. However, I'm very privileged. I have access to a car that can get me to training. I have no dependents that I would need to arrange care for in order to get to training. I live pretty centrally, so it's pretty easy for me to get to lots of locations. So it's like really easy for me to be on time to training. It would be important for me to not write off selecting a player because they were late to training. It would be good for me to like investigate the reasons why someone might be late, whether I could help them get to training, or like whether I could be more flexible with my expectations. Another example, you might have a player come along to your selections to spirit of the game. They might cause some contact, get in heated discussions. Maybe they seem aggressive and unfriendly, but maybe they've come from another sport where these are totally normal behaviors and are unaware that those behaviors don't work so well with Frisbee. So a conversation with that person would be a great first step to learn more about their sporting background, help them get their head around self-refereeing, and they might bring a lot to your team with their experience in other sports. Another example, you might get a player who is hesitant to cut and maybe hangs out in the deep space. I have been very privileged to play on teams where I'm encouraged to get involved and I'm supported by my teammates. This player might not have had such a supportive environment, meaning they have like learnt to play hesitantly or hang out like out of the way. It would be a shame for me to write off this player because of their hesitancy to cut. I think it would be more important for me to encourage them to get involved. They may become a very thoughtful cutter that will be a great glue player on your team. And the last one, so in our Nexus selection criteria, you might have said like, seen like sideline support was one of the things we're selecting on. Sideline support for a more extroverted person might be like loud cheering, but sideline support for a quieter person might be checking in on individuals on the sideline. And I think it's important to be aware that there's like multiple ways to express the criteria we put forward. Okay, that's what I was going to say on selections. Does anyone have any questions?
How many rounds of selections do you either Nexus or have you done with other teams?
I don't know if we've done it the same way twice. We've done like a bunch. We've done it without a selection event before. I think this year we might have had like 3 or 4 trainings that were trainings, but that's when we're like watching you. Yeah, we always invite everyone to train. Like we're never closed. So even if someone was cut, they could still come to training, which I think is different to other cities who have multiple teams. So yeah, we've tried a bunch of different ways.
What's your view on giving feedback between trials if you have multiple trials? So like if someone's hanging out in the deep, giving them feedback and seeing how they adjust.
Yeah, I think that's good. I think I've seen feedback like forced on people, which I probably don't agree with, but like you can use phrases like, are you in a good space to receive feedback? Or like, is there some tips I could give you? I think that's a really good idea. I just think like that comes into that like early, clear, honest communication. If there's something they can adjust that will help them, I think try to find the best way to get them that information.
I'm going to be a brown noser instead of a question asker, but I just thought those are very insightful examples. Nice work, Eva.
Thanks. I'll never yell at anyone for being late ever again, I promise.
This isn't really a question, but it was more just adding on to what you said about feedback. Is this season, when you guys were doing selections, I don't know if you intended it to be like this, but I found you were very like encouraging of asking for feedback, so you were just like, oh, like flick an email and we'll like give you some feedback, and that was like an easy way if I was like scared to actually ask you to just email and get like quite a good, I don't know, sense of what I needed to improve on. So I don't know, I liked that.
Yeah, I think it's good to give people like multiple avenues and allow them to like be their own person and asking for feedback. So like not everyone's going to feel comfortable coming up to me and asking for feedback. So like giving them the opportunity to message me, message someone else, email the club, like good to make it as easy as possible and make it really clear that you want to give it out if you do. Well, you should.
Yeah, and I suppose to add to that, as someone who was giving the feedback, it was really nice. So like if you're not very confident maybe, or if it's your first time doing a selections, then especially asking people to email their request for feedback gave us time as selectors to think through what we wanted to say so that we could be consistent, because there were like 5 selectors, I think, which is quite a large group. And also it gives you time to think it through instead of, I know on the spot sometimes you just say the first thing that comes to mind and then 5 minutes later you're thinking actually that's not the thing you need to focus on, you need to focus on this other thing. So it's pretty good on both sides, I think, to do that emailing option.
We also had a spreadsheet this year because there were 5 of us where we'd all like keep our notes in one place, so that whoever ended up giving the feedback had like all of the viewpoints. I think it might be quite hard to get bombarded with different people's feedback at different times. So like it was nice to do it in like a concise way, and it was all there available for the person who was actually delivering it. There's going to be more time. Well, we can hang out all night. I've got one more section, so maybe I'll do that and then we can keep asking questions. Does that sound good? Great, cool, okay. So lastly, I'm going to talk about planning a training session, which was the title of the talk. Okay, so for planning a training session, I think it's really important to write it out in detail in advance with timings and descriptions. And then I think if you have this option available, it's really great to talk it through with someone. So I'll often like talk through my whole training plan with Angus, get him to like ask me questions and like clarify things I wasn't sure about explaining, and also it allows me to preempt some of the questions that I might get at an actual training session. It helps me feel really prepared and confident. So I'm going to share a training plan. It's not actually my training plan. It's a training plan I was given in a coaching course. I think it's really good because it has options built into it on catering for different ability levels. So that is why I'm sharing this one. Okay. So this is Mish Phillips's training plan. So what's really good about this is it's really clear. I like how the timings, even the 5-minute welcome at the beginning is like catered into the time frame. There's really clear descriptions with every activity. And that means that if you have multiple coaches taking different groups, they're hopefully on the same page with the advice they're giving in the descriptions. So it moves through from like a welcome, there's a warm up, and then it moves into drills. And there's really great descriptions. These drills here in particular I love because with each of them she's got, if you're new to the drill, and then she's got like what you're aiming for in this drill. So this one here, so this is kind of like a Hollywood Squares defensive drill where the goal is to keep your hips facing the person you're marking. So if you're new to the drill, your goals here, you know you're doing it right. If you're like doing the right turns, you're facing the person you're marking. And then if you're experienced at the drill, well, you're not giving up a single under, or you're doing push-ups. So there's like different goals for different people. So it moves through these drills. And then at the end, they've got game time. Somewhere in here, it says something like when they're making the teams, they're matching up people who are like of the same ability level, and those people are always marking each other. So they make sure even if you've got like a mixed ability game, that everyone is being challenged in that game. And then they've allowed time for like a debrief and questions at the end. So having something like this for each of your training sessions that you're running is really great. I think it's important, the timing, like mapping out the times is really important, because it means you can make the most of the time you have together with your team. As a coach, I would get there early to like set up cones and stuff, so I don't have to waste time doing that while I've got my team together. And I would allocate more time than I thought to each drill, because they probably will take more time than you think. People need to get water and questions and stuff, so allocating more time than you think. Another thing that Mish had done in that training plan is she'd put in more drills than she thought she was going to be able to do. So then you've kind of got yourself covered both ways. Like, if you know what you're taking out if you run out of time, but if you have extra time, you have something planned to do. So I generally use that structure, like warm up, body and throws, some drills, and then games, trying to tie it all together, make it relevant to the theme of your session. So don't run drills with no purpose. If you don't know a drill that teaches you what you want to teach, you can make one up. I like back all of you. You are totally capable of that. You can borrow ideas from other sports. You can ask around. I'm sure everyone in this group would be really happy to help you plan some drills for a particular topic. Oh, another good trick that I like is hiding technical skills inside your warm-ups and your drills. For example, footwork, so adding turns into your warm-up, turns into your drills. That means by the end of the season, even if your players aren't doing agility in their own time, they've done a bazillion turns and they're getting really good at them. You can do the same thing with fitness. If you think fitness is something your team needs to work on and maybe you can't expect them to do it outside of training, you can do things like adding in a game of mini make it take it, like adding a bit more intensity to the drills, making the most of that time together. And everyone loves the playing a frisbee game at the end of your training, and I think it's important to make sure we do that and keep it fun, but you can keep the focus of your training session relevant in your game. So like I talked about in the selections, but my favorite way to do this would be to like alter the rules a little bit. And that could be as basic as you must play vertical stack, because we learned vertical stack today. But again, like shortening stall counts, forcing people to swing the disc. You can take out pulls to make it quicker, resetting the disc from the same position.
Eva, you're muted.
Whoa, not for long. How long was I muted for?
4 hand gestures.
Okay. Okay, so the last thing I'm going to talk about is questions. Did I say that? Okay, so like I said at the start, where I will talk my training plan through with Angus and get him to ask me questions and try and like preempt those in my descriptions to kind of save time. So that's a really good idea. Kind of thinking about things your team likes to know. So for example, Nexus love to know the rotation through a drill. So I make sure that I plan the rotation through a drill so I can explain it to them before they even ask. And the last thing about questions is people asking questions can be really scary, and it can feel like they're pulling apart your training plan. And 99% of the time, that is not true. And they're just trying to understand it more fully. So remember, it's actually okay to say, I'm not sure, let's have a think about that. Or I can see that your way might work too. Let's try mine first, then we can try yours after. And you also don't have to have the answers to their questions immediately. You can come back to them. And that's the end of my talk. So now you can ask questions and I'll tell you to come back to me later. Does anyone have any questions?
Generally, are your trainings 3 hours?
No. We've been doing one weekly all-together training on a Sunday for about 2 hours, maybe slightly less, because we try and share with the boys. And then we have like a pod training weekly, which is like a smaller group training, and there's multiple of them that happen, so they're hopefully closer to people's homes, so like more accessible. It might not be, it's worked okay. Like there's pros and cons to every approach. I think I would love another weekday training, but we also have 3 league days a week in Wellington, so that leaves pretty slim pickings for other training options.
If you're wanting to really drill a new skill or something, or a new technique or type of play, and so sort of going back to the start of the talk when you're planning out the season, is there a way that you would do that in terms of, say, like hand reset? You're trying to drill that into the team, a new type of one or whatever. Would you plan out a session or like 3 sessions in a row to do that, or do you jump around a bit and do one session and then go away and do defense for a week and then come back to it later? Like, what's sort of a good method for really getting people to pick up a new skill over a season?
Yeah, that is a great question. I think something like handler resets, where you're going to have to do it a lot anyway. It might be one of those ones where it's good to like have like one session on it, and like maybe leave the next session as like, we're not quite sure what we're going to do there yet, we'll see, and like see how the first one goes and whether you like need another one or you think you can like come back to it at another stage. I don't know if I'm a complete pro at planning out a whole season, but I think like being flexible is good, and like playing it by ear and like listening to your gut as well about like, I think more time on this would help. Maybe we don't need that extra zone or whatever. I don't know if anyone else wants to chime in. Feel free.
I can.
Yeah, go.
Something that Sprocket does for us is that in like the next few trainings, when we're doing gameplay, you might get double points for using a skill. So if there were 2 IO breaks in this point, you get 2 points when you score. Or yeah, if a swing is followed by a continuation, then you get 2 points. But if you only score without using that skill, you get 1 point. So it kind of reminds people to use the thing that they've learned in previous sessions.
That's really cool.
I guess with that spreadsheet I had as well, you could like, we didn't use it very well this season. Making this talk has reminded me of all the best practice we should probably do. But there's that option there for like skill that we should be refreshing. And then if you have that there every week, it's kind of a reminder as a coach to like maybe just briefly cover it off if it's not going well, or like, you know, keep it in your head as well as the player's head. Because if you've forgotten about it, then I think they've probably forgotten about it.
One question too, Vixens has experimented with this in a couple of years, but what are your thoughts on, do you start with polishing skills up and then introduce strategy, you know, in the second half? Or do you start with strategy and then wait and polish up skills through those bedded in strategies in the second half, you know?
Yeah. I'd probably use my like welcome sessions to kind of like polish up some skills and maybe see where those are at. I think in my experience, I think you need quite a bit of time to get the strategies ingrained if you're going to be kind of like a structured driven team. I think they need to be quite early. maybe depending on your group, you can introduce them on the fly in a tournament and really like hone them then. But my experience has been that like they need to be early so you can like keep refreshing them, but depends on the group.
I really like that. Well, in that training plan example, you had Michelle had examples of what to get out of it if you're a beginner and then if you're more advanced, because that is a challenge if you're running trainings with a real diverse sort of or a big gap in skills, and to have the more experienced players still feel challenged doing an away and under drill or the Hollywood squares, or but when it's all completely new and definitely challenging to beginner players, so still getting everyone to feel challenged. How do you set up scrimmages at the end for that? Would you keep everyone together and just make sure that there's equal on either team so that beginners can match up against beginners and experienced against experienced? Or do you split off and have a super competitive experienced scrimmage there and let the beginners do their own?
Yeah, depends what your numbers are like. I think we kind of, in the past, we've been very relaxed when we get to the scrimmage, and it's kind of just like whoever marks whoever, and I don't think that's the best way to get the most out of it. It's something through going through making this talk, I've realized that I think we need to like put people into challenging matchups. I think everyone playing together for us has been really good for like making a club culture. I think the splitting, if we had like 28 people, then like sure, but and sometimes we do, and that can work, but I think playing together and playing with everyone and just like tweaking the matchups to make it challenging for everyone. I listened to a thing this week, and someone said they use like an 80-20 rule, just for like, this is more like general over the whole training, that like trying to make your training like it's going to be challenging and beneficial for everyone, but like hone it to like 80% of people should be getting a lot out of it, and maybe you miss 20%, they're still going to be getting something out of it, but maybe like it's okay if you miss 20% with your really. Does that make sense? Yeah.
And there are so many drills in Frisbee, and I like 10 years experience of Frisbee. I've been through a lot as well, but I struggle to remember them. Like I started this year to write them down when we went through different training camp with New Zealand team or even with blueberries and stuff. But I don't know, is there a way for you to kind of, remember them? And because it's hard to write them down. Usually you draw something, and I don't know, any tips on that?
There's a really good online website app if you're someone who likes to have them drawn out with like, it's made for Frisbee, so you could like store your drills. I keep them mainly in my head, and I really like game situations when I'm coaching, which makes it easier because a game's a game and you just like fiddle with it a little bit. So I'm not like super drill orientated, so maybe not the best person to ask you a question, but I can point you in the direction of the website, and you could make us this like database of drills, Noemi, and we'll all be sorted. We should. I think like sharing drills and stuff is great, because like a lot of what I know or can like pull on to use is something I learned from a different coach and a different team. So like it's really great to pull ideas if people are keen. Yeah. Hey Kelly, did you want to talk about your ACL rehab stuff? Because I think that's really important.
We just have like about 10 or 12 drills that we can do, and we pick like 2 or 3 to do after every warm-up, even if it's like jump lunges or like side-to-side hops or that sort of thing. And it's just a focus just to have people doing these exercises with good form. We kind of recognized that we had 2 people on the team that have done their ACL, and we have like 3 or 4 or 5 under 18-year-olds that are in that like high risk category of doing something bad to their knees. So it was just something to focus on, that like You just pick somebody and they can pick their favorite 3 that they want to do that week. And it takes all of 2 or 3 minutes to do. So it's nothing big, but just recognizing that like women in sport have this problem. Yeah.
That's cool. I like that.
Kelly, if you'd be willing to share those exercises, that'd be really helpful.
Yep. I don't know them off the top of my head, but I can totally write them down and send them out to you guys.
That'd be awesome.
I can put them on this event page if you like. Cool.
I have a
Yeah,
question.
the FIFA 11 plus, which is a more intense version. So that's online.
Yeah, I think it's similar stuff.
It'll be the same exercises, I'm sure.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely.
How do you stop boredom at trainings, Eva? Like, especially if you are just having skills that you're like, I need the team to get this down, and it just means running similar drills for quite a few weeks until they get it right, but they get frustrated in the meantime.
Yeah, that's tricky. I believe that like everyone can get something out of just like throwing. Like even the most elite player can get something out of just throwing. So I'm like easily entertained, but I understand that some people might not be. I think stuff like if you had a look at I can send Mish's training plan out to people, but like stuff like where she had like different goals for different levels. So like maybe if you consider yourself an elite player, you should be like running at 100%. There should be no turnovers. Like burpee if you turn it over. Like if like making it more physically challenging. Someone said one time to me that like training should either be like can either be physically challenging or mentally challenging. So maybe if the mental stimulation is gone because we really need to get this down, but we've done it a bunch of times, like making it more physically demanding. What else did I have on? Yeah, and just like finding things to challenge them on. So like getting it at 100%, make sure your turns are really good, like running as hard as you can, put challenging defenders on them or something.
I wonder if that's a bit similar to, I've often had people say that they really want tips and ideas, or like, how can we make trainings more intense? And personally, I really struggle with that, and especially as a coach, because I would think, well, that's hard for me to make you more intense. That needs to come from you. And so I would, we'd have various ideas of how we can try and create that intensity to bring it out. But I think it's really personal as well. And so, but finding ways to remind players that them being here is for their own benefit, and that it's up to them to get out of the training what they want. And so you want intense training, be intense. You want to become a better thrower, you need to challenge yourself and step out, throw wider, throw lower, throw faster. And so I guess giving them those tips and cues. But I don't know, what are your thoughts on that, Eva? Like, is it things like that about people being willing to challenge themselves, I think is really personal. And I struggle just trying to get that out of people sometimes when they want me to get it out of them, but I'm like, no, it has to come from you. It's a bit of both, but yeah.
Yeah, that's super tricky. I agree. I think there's things you can do, like I can think of drills I ran where there was a huge long line of people waiting to enter the drill, and then they were in it for a couple of seconds and then they were out of it again and they were bored, and I was like, be more intense, cheer for your teammates, and they were like, I've been in this line for 10 minutes, Eva, like so like there's like you can like egg them on in the right direction. Like maybe you need to make your drills like more groups so they're moving through it more quickly. I've done stuff like silly things like what's the paper scissors rock game where you cheer for everyone? Someone know what I mean? Just like a cheering game before you like start the thing, so they're already in that like pumped up mindset. What else? Yeah, it is really hard, but like I think like as a coach you can like do little things to try and make it more intense, like add defense, add intense matchups, like and then hopefully your players go that extra bit of the way. I don't know if anyone else has any tips on making things intense. I'd love to hear them.
Janelle and Coral do this really well. And maybe Janelle will add in bits after this, but I think you guys seem to do like game scenario talks midway through training sometimes. Like before we do the game, at the end of a training, you'll be like, okay, come on guys, bring it in. Let's, focus and we need to really put effort in, as if we're at a tournament and it's just before the final and we need to get our heads. And I think you guys do that really well. And maybe you've got some other tips as well.
Yeah, one of our goals for the season as a team was to play each game in training with the intensity like it was a tournament. So it was really like, this was your team for the day and you really wanted to take down the other team. That helped with the intensity at the end. And then when we make drills, for Gnomes' point earlier, when we're planning our sessions at the start of the season, instead of being like, oh, what drills do we know? We think about what skills we want, and then often we'll just make a drill to fit the skills that we want it to impart rather than relying on existing drills. So that's why sometimes you're doing kind of random stuff. It's because we've made it up and every now and then it just completely doesn't work like we thought it was going to work at all. But
yeah, I remember this season you did like 2 or 3 different times experimental drills, but at least you wound us up. You're like, okay, girls, we don't know what we're doing, but let's try it out. And yeah, sometimes
this is what we want to get out of it. Yeah, most of the time it works and sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, that was to try and stave off boredom as well from people who've run the same drill too many times.
That's really cool that you tried things that might not work. I think when I was thinking about your talk last time, Janelle, and like applying it to coaching, I think, like personally, I think sometimes I'm too hard on myself to like not fail as a coach. Like I can never fail as a coach. I can never try something that like might not work. I can't let them down like that. And I think the same kind of mental strength mindset stuff applies to coaching the same way as it does to players, is that you have to allow yourself to fail sometimes if you're going to be like innovative and like stuff like that. So that's cool. We're nearly at 8:30. Everyone probably wants to go to bed. Are there any last questions? And anyone can message me anytime as well if there's anything you want to know, and we can keep sharing resources because I think that's really cool.
This is quite a different question. This is Steph, by the way.
Hi, Steph.
Priscilla and I are coaching some high school girls, and a lot of them are quite fresh to playing Frisbee, and like the first 5 trainings have been quite difficult in terms of getting them out of a very hesitant mindset. And I guess our goal as high school coaches is for retention, to get them to keep playing so that they can play their first high school tournament, which unfortunately might not happen in the next few months. But we really want them to keep playing, and I was wondering from anyone if there was anything different that we need to do as coaches for high school girls compared to newer players who are a bit older in terms of running trainings.
Good question. I only have a tiny bit of experience with high school girls. So if anyone else has more, feel free to chime in.
I haven't coached, but I just know that we've all been a high school girl, and so if we can put ourselves back into a high school girl body or mindset, I think we're all really, not so confident. So I think it's just lots and lots and lots of encouragement. Like a guy needs maybe 1 to every 10 encouraging words. That's probably what I'd say. I'll shut up now.
Totally agree, thanks.
And I guess what is your goal for the team? Like what Eva was saying, do you have a main event, or is the purpose of the team just to like a more social purpose, or just to get people comfortable playing, or that could maybe help frame how you're approaching trainings too?
Yeah.
I think.
Oh, wait.
Sorry.
I guess
Okay,
there's no
you go,
tournament.
Steph. Sorry.
Sorry, Eva. I should probably get a video cam at some point. Yeah, now that there's no tournament, because there's usually a tournament next month, I guess the focus should be more on fun and getting people to keep playing, because it's Frisbee is fun. So yeah, I guess we'll keep messaging them, because that's the only way we can get that message through at the moment. Thanks.
Once you are able to hang out with them again, I think, I mean, it's tricky, but like trying to make it like as safe a space as possible, so they do feel like they start being less hesitant and they feel really comfortable, like what Janelle talked about last week. Like they feel comfortable and supported by their teammates, which is really hard. But I've heard like people talk about like just being comfortable being like silly together. So maybe it doesn't even have to be like Frisbee things that you're doing together, but some kind of like silly team building stuff where like they get a little bit out of their comfort zone and they like learn to like each other and like trust each other and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think games that aren't quite like Ultimate but use Frisbees or use skills that you need as well. Like, have you played Shtick before? It's like you can run with the Frisbee and you just have to like throw the disc into a box, or like rob the nest, or like things like that that are kind of Frisbee adjacent, but like kind of point out skills that people already have as well. Because there'll be people that are like super fit and like really love running around, or there'll be people that can throw and want to throw, and those games that kind of utilize both skills is good.
Cool, I've written that down.
Yeah, I'll post the link. So I've been talking, I think every time I'm going to end up talking about these Northwest Youth Ultimate coaching series that's happening on YouTube. And they have one that's specifically about how to retain girls and underrepresented players in Ultimate. And I think it was that one where she talks about, so she does a lot of work with young girls, probably younger than high school. So we're probably talking sort of like 11, 12-year-olds. And said something that I found quite interesting, which was that, so we're being really supportive of them, obviously, but they can tell when you're lying. So don't, you know how we have a tendency to tell new players, oh, that's a great throw, even though it just went straight to the ground. So it's sort of that concept of not going so far to the point where you're actually just telling them they're doing well when they're not, because then that sort of will remove some of that security, really, where they feel like you don't trust them maybe to be honest with them. And she talks a lot about growth mindset, which was obviously in line with what Janelle was saying last week as well. So I'll try and find that one again and post that link in the event too. It might be useful.
Awesome, thanks, Noah.
Yeah, and similar to that, you know, making sure that you're complimenting them, and making sure that they feel like they are doing well, but not lying to them. Some things to help there could be, and that I really tried to do when I was working with school age kids, was find really specific things, even if they were good at, even if they weren't like, oh, you've got a great forehand. It was like, oh, that grip that you're using on the forehand is really good, and if you keep doing that, then you'll improve. Sort of, I think at that age, maybe all of us, if any time in life, maybe still now, you just get a small compliment. It doesn't have to be a big one, but you sort of hold on to that. And especially if you're new to Frisbee and you're told that you're good at something, even if it's tiny, you sort of get sold into it. And then the other thing that I noticed lots when I was doing school stuff was, I think they need more structure than maybe adults do. So when you're setting up a session, being even more clear than you usually would, or take some time to explain the same thing a couple of different ways, so that everyone gets it and everyone's on the same page about what to do.
Cool. I found the planning examples really, really helpful tonight. Thanks, Eva, and thanks, Becca, just now.
All good. I can send most things. I can send everything through. I don't care. If you want, maybe I'll just post them in the group. You're welcome. um, yeah. Does anyone have any final questions, or should we all go to bed because it's bedtime? Thanks heaps, Mara. This is really cool to have everyone together and working together for the same goals and stuff. And thanks everyone for coming along.
Yeah, thanks Eva, and thanks everyone. Lots of people had suggestions when Steph asked a question, so if you would like to combine several suggestions into a 30 to 60 minute talk, then let me know, because I'm quite keen to keep doing more of these sessions. I've got a few more lined up, but I'm always keen for more people to put their hand forward to do it, so please let me know. Otherwise, yeah, the next week I'm doing next Tuesday. We've got two quite close together because I postponed this one because I had plans this weekend. Now that we're in level 2, we'll have to figure out exactly when the best time to do these is.